Ukraine's armed forces have been forced onto the back foot for large parts of the war. They've had to dig in and defend their ground against intense and ruthless Russian aggression, withstanding daily drone swarms and fending off wave after wave of assaults. However, slowly but surely, the tide has started to turn, and now Ukraine has had enough of playing defense. It's ready to go on the offensive, and it has a massive missile arsenal just waiting to be unleashed. Fabian Hoffman, defense analyst, missile expert, and doctoral research fellow at the Oslo Nuclear Project, recently took an in-depth look at Ukraine's astonishing missile evolution over the last decade, charting the country's rapid growth and remarkable ambition in this all-important aspect of modern warfare. Writing on his Missile Matters blog, Hoffman explained that, like other former Soviet countries, Ukraine had a deep reliance on Russia for missile components and trade in the post-Soviet era. But that all changed in 2014, when Russia forcefully annexed the Crimean Peninsula and irreparably fractured its relationship with Ukraine in the process. From that moment on, Russia effectively became Ukraine's enemy, an aggressive occupying force taking over a sizable piece of its territory. Kyiv can no longer rely on Moscow as it had before, and it had to make some major changes in its missile industry. It still had some Soviet-era legacy design and production facilities operated by firms like Yuzhnoye and Yuzmash, which has since been renamed to Pivdenmash, as well as the Luch Design Bureau, specializing in long-range missile systems. Ukraine also had several missile development programs in progress and worked hard to deploy the likes of the Vilka-guided 300mm rocket into service in 2018 and the R-360 Neptune anti-ship cruise missile in 2021. It had even opened talks with Indonesia about a possible export deal for the Neptune in 2021, while continuing work on a separate short-range ballistic missile program known under the codename RIM-2, which was repeatedly plagued with funding and timeline issues. In short, by the beginning of 2022, Ukraine had managed to make the most of its post-Soviet missile facilities, knowledge and resources, completing a couple of seemingly successful domestic programs and establishing a small but growing missile industry of its own. However, it didn't have the massive stockpile of missiles that Russia had, nor did it have the same extensive storage facilities, numerous production plants, or the colossal military budget of its neighbour. So, when the war kicked off in early 2022, Ukraine couldn't exactly counter the Russian missile threat. What's more, it appears that the Kremlin intentionally targeted missile industry sites across Ukraine to disrupt missile production and delay Kyiv's development of new weapons. It's used its own missiles to target the Pivdenmash production plant in the city of Dnipro in late 2022, for example. Reports also emerged in the early stages of the war of Russian attacks on infrastructure related to Kyiv's RIM-2 program, like the Pavlograd chemical plant, a solid fuel production site in the Dnipropetrovsk region. That plant was struck in May 2023 and then again in late 2023 and May 2024. These attacks, combined with the fact that Ukraine suddenly found itself having to defend its border regions and repel a gigantic invading force, meant that missile programs suffered serious setbacks. Ukraine was faced with a dilemma. It had to focus on its priorities, which mainly revolved around preventing Russia from gaining too much ground and digging in to stabilize key positions along the front lines. At the same time, it couldn't simply abandon its missile development projects. It needed weapons that it could use to strike back against the invaders. While exactly what decisions were made behind the scenes is unclear, it's likely that Kyiv made the call to streamline its RIM-2 program, with the aim of getting an operational missile into production as soon as possible. Ukraine also made use of its existing missile stocks as well as it could, most notably firing R-360 Neptune anti-ship missiles at Russia's famous Moskva flagship, which sunk in April 2022. Meanwhile, Kyiv's engineers were hard at work developing a way to modify the Neptune to strike land-based targets as well as those at sea. According to Hoffman, this likely involved inserting a jamming-resistant GPS receiver into the missiles, potentially along with a terminal guidance seeker to help the missile find its way to its target and strike with precision. However, this all took time, and for the first year of the war, Ukraine's missile industry struggled to make any major strides, presumably due to a mixture of factors, like a lack of funding and resources, plus the aforementioned Russian attacks on key pieces of infrastructure. Fortunately, things started to change for the better in 2023. First, Ukraine obtained long-range strike capabilities in May when it received shipments of Storm Shadow and SCALP-EG missiles from the UK and France. It's believed that the UK sent up to 300 of these missiles in several batches, with France supplying another 50. Each of these missiles is valued between $1 and $2.5 million, and with a plus 155-mile, 250-kilometer range, they're capable of dealing serious damage, even to harden or reinforce targets. This was proven on numerous occasions in the months that followed, with Ukraine famously firing Storm Shadows at Sevastopol port and Russia's Black Sea Fleet in September 2023, dealing serious damage to a Russian submarine, landing ship, and the Black Sea Fleet headquarters building too. Ukraine also received ATACMS from the US and reportedly fired them for the first time in late 2023 to destroy 9 helicopters at Russian bases in occupied areas of Ukraine, while also killing dozens of Russian troops. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said at the time, "They have performed very accurately. ATACMS have proven themselves." The Ukrainian armed forces have since used ATACMS in numerous strikes against Russian air bases, air defense systems, ammunition storage facilities, and radar stations. However, Ukraine learned some important lessons about missiles in 2023. First, it learned how effective they could be. The early Storm Shadow strikes were incredibly effective, and Kyiv knew that if it could build up its missile stocks, it could carry on more similar strikes in the future, wiping out high-value Russian targets, one after another, which would dramatically weaken the Kremlin's war machine and perhaps even turn the tide of the conflict. Second, Ukraine learned that while it had many generous and supportive allies around the world, particularly in the NATO alliance, it couldn't necessarily rely on them to deliver missiles in the large and consistent quantities it needed to truly strike back against Russia as regularly as it wanted. Several Western nations, like France and the UK, were happy to send over some of their excess missile stocks to Ukraine, but had no plans to start large-scale production and keep the deliveries coming. Other nations, like Germany, were hesitant to send any missiles at all, with the country concerned that sending its long-range Taurus missiles to Kyiv could escalate the conflict and drag Europe into a full-scale war with Russia. Third, Ukraine's armed forces learned that even if it did receive missiles from its Western allies, they would often come with restrictions. The US, for example, initially prohibited Ukraine from using ATACMS in attacks on Russian soil, and similar limitations were imposed on Storm Shadow usage too. These restrictions were eventually lifted, but Ukraine had seen enough to come to a clear and obvious conclusion. It had to work on its own domestic programs. If it wanted missiles it could produce in vast numbers and use as and when it wanted, without any limitations or restrictions getting in the way. And that's exactly what it did. By the summer of 2023, the country had successfully modified its anti-ship Neptune missiles to strike land-based targets, and used one to wipe out a Russian S-400 missile system radar at Cape Tarkhan-Kut in Crimea. More attacks followed, like in September 2023, when Ukrainian missiles, most credibly reported as Storm Shadow Scalp, damaged 2 Russian ships in Sevastopol, or in July 2024, when one missile struck an airbase in Kursk, dozens of miles beyond the borders of Ukraine. Ukraine's engineers also got to work on pushing the boundaries of the Neptune missile even further, laying out plans for a brand new variant named Long Neptune, which would have a range far greater than any other missile in the country's arsenal. The country also sought to support its domestic suppliers of missile and long-range drone technology, partnering with small startups and scale-ups from other countries to help supply the parts it needed. It was an ambitious but intelligent plan, and it soon started to bear fruit. By the end of 2024, Ukraine had produced and acquired sizable stocks of mini-cruise missiles and long-range drones in various forms, like the Lyuty and FP-1 drones and the Ruta and Peklo missiles. It soon set them to work, conducting numerous long-range strikes on Russian targets. Because the missiles and drones involved were quite small, a lot of these attacks were designed to wipe out entire buildings or cause widespread devastation, but instead dealt small yet significant bits of damage here and there, starting fires at production plants, damaging enemy aircraft, disrupting gas and oil facilities, and so on. The damage caused by these attacks has all added up over time, causing all sorts of problems for the Kremlin, and Ukraine has continued to cleverly use its remaining supplies of Western missiles and other more powerful domestic options, like the Neptunes, to deal as much damage as it possibly can. Now, however, Ukraine is ready to up the ante to whole new levels, progressing from mini-missile strikes and limited long-range attacks to a far more destructive and powerful arsenal that could rain down fire on Russia like never before. It recently unveiled two major additions to its missile stocks: the Long Neptune, a game-changing addition with extraordinary range, and the Sapsan, Ukraine's first domestically produced ballistic missile, said to be even stronger than America's ATACMS. Here's a closer look at both, starting off with the Long Neptune. In late summer 2023, reports first emerged that Ukraine was adapting its R-360 Neptune missile for land attack roles. At that stage, the baseline missile already had a maximum range of roughly 175 to 185 miles. Later reporting in 2024 and 2025 described plans for an extended range variant dubbed Long Neptune. While that's not a short range by any stretch, and still gives Kyiv plenty of Russian targets to aim at, it also isn't long enough to threaten any infrastructure in or around Moscow. What's more, since Russia knows how far Ukraine's missiles can go, it can quite easily position its most valuable assets and construct its most important pieces of infrastructure just beyond that range, effectively keeping them relatively safe and sound. But with the Long Neptune on the scene, that's no longer the case. In March 2025, Zelenskyy took to Telegram to announce that Ukraine's new long-range Neptune had already been deployed on the battlefield. The Long Neptune had been tested and successfully used in combat. A new Ukrainian missile, an accurate strike. The range is 1,000 kilometers. Thank you to our Ukrainian developers, manufacturers, and military. We continue to work to guarantee Ukrainian security. More recently, as part of Ukraine's independence celebrations on August 24, a closer look at the Long Neptune in detail was revealed. It appeared in an Instagram video on the Zobraya or Weapons channel. At one point in the video, what looks like a longer and larger version of the R-360 can be seen. And while the video doesn't go into much detail, experts and analysts have been assessing the images to learn all they can. According to early estimates, the new missile measures up to close to 20 feet, or just over 6 meters, without including the booster. It's also a thicker, broader missile than the original, with a maximum width of around 20 inches or 50 centimeters, notably larger than the standard Neptune, which is around 15 inches, 38 centimeters wide at its thickest point. The Long Neptune also comes complete with bigger wings and tail sections, and as Zelenskyy himself states, it's said to be able to travel a staggering 1,000 kilometers or 621 miles. That's around 4 times further than a Storm Shadow, opening up a vast range of viable new targets beyond the borders of Ukraine and deep into Russian territory. Targets like refineries, production plants, logistical hubs, air bases, and more. The same types of targets Ukraine has been successfully striking week after week, month after month, with its drones and existing missiles to weaken Russia from within. The country's armed forces and intelligence services have proven they're more than capable of identifying the right types of targets and planning the perfect times to strike them. But for a long time, they had to make do with relatively simple drones and smaller missiles that weren't always capable of dealing serious, long-lasting damage. The Long Neptune changes that. It gives Ukraine devastating new offensive capabilities. The country armed forces could, for instance, launch a swarm of drones at a Russian airfield or military factory far from the front lines, saturating the enemy's air defenses before a Long Neptune missile follows up behind to deal the knockout blow. At a time when Russia is reeling from unfathomable losses of soldiers, vehicles, and equipment, this addition to its enemy's arsenal could be the tipping point that sends the Kremlin spiraling over the edge and into oblivion. And the news gets even worse for Russian President Vladimir Putin, because Ukraine now also appears ready to launch its second new missile, the Sapsan, formerly known as the Rim 2. Ukraine hasn't revealed too much information about this particular missile, but what's currently known makes it sound like a very powerful and promising addition to the country's arsenal. It has a warhead that weighs in excess of 1,000 pounds, 480 kilograms, plus an operational range of around 190 miles or 300 kilometers, though some experts say it could potentially go further, perhaps as far as 310 miles or 500 kilometers. It's fired from ground-based platforms and can reach extraordinary speeds of over 5,000 km per hour or more than 3,100 miles per hour, which is more than 4 times the speed of sound. Ukraine is set to be in the process of establishing the necessary infrastructure for mass production of these incredible ballistic missiles, which could allow it to launch devastating strikes on Russia with the same type of intensity that the Kremlin uses in its own attacks on towns and cities across Ukraine. But, unlike Russia, which regularly uses its drones and missiles to illegally strike civilian targets like schools, hospitals and homes, Ukraine will continue to focus on military infrastructure to wear away at the Russian war machine one piece at a time. Ballistic missiles like Sapsans are vital for any modern military force and hold particular importance to Ukraine at this stage of the war. They carry huge warheads, which allows them to deal massive damage wherever they strike, even against strong, reinforced targets and structures. They're also lightning fast, moving several times faster than both cruise missiles and drones, which makes them far harder to intercept. Even if Russian radars can spot an incoming Sapsan missile, they may not have the necessary time needed to respond. As such, Ukraine should find it even easier, with the aid of its Sapsan missiles, to take out valuable pieces of Russian infrastructure. It could blow up parked jets and bombers on Russian airfields, for example, or wipe out oil refineries and production plants, further crippling the Russian economy. What's more, Ukraine's latest missiles are said to be even better than the only ballistic missiles they've had up to this point, US-supplied ATACMS. Sapsan's warheads are larger and more destructive, they travel faster than ATACMS, and they may eventually have a longer range too. Military analyst and director of the Center for Army Conversion and Disarmament Studies, Valentin Badrak, summed up the Sapsan's potential in a June interview with Ukrainian news outlet Ukrinform. This missile is clearly bigger than the ATACMS we currently have, and most importantly, it's learned how to strike with precision. Badrak also appears confident that Ukraine can make significant numbers of these new missiles, stating, "I don't know how many missiles we can expect per month or year. I think production will scale up very significantly." Aviation expert Konstantin Kurivola is also impressed, saying, "A 400 kilogram warhead is powerful for a missile of this class. A missile like this is at the operational tactical level. It's designed to destroy logistic hubs, command centers, and ammunition depots." That's 2 new mega missiles, the Long Neptune and the Sapsan, that Ukraine is now ready to roll out against Russian targets, and launches are already underway. There have been several reports and rumors of Long Neptunes being used to hit targets like the Xenia oil pumping station and the Tuapse oil refinery earlier this year, and the Sapsan has already undergone its first combat test too. And Ukraine is not stopping there. It's becoming a major missile industry powerhouse, having recently revealed yet another new cruise missile that could prove to be the crowning jewel in its increasingly vast and complex arsenal, the Flamingo FP5. Developed by the Firepoint Defense Company, which has been one of the top producers of combat drones used to strike back against Russia in recent months, the Flamingo is reported to have recently entered serial production, with plans and systems in place to make up to 200 a month, according to the company's CEO and technical directory, Irina Terek. Terek has also revealed some astonishing details about what this missile may be capable of. Flamingo is the long-range cruise missile that can carry a 1,150 kilogram warhead and fly into Russia for 3,000 kilometers. We came up with it pretty fast. It took less than 9 months to develop from an idea to its first successful tests on the battlefield. I will not tell you about its exact speed, but I can say it's faster than all the other missiles we currently have. It's completely Ukrainian made. The missile's unusual name and appearance, early units showed a bright pink tip due to a factory coating error which inspired the nickname Flamingo, may seem almost humorous, but despite its dainty sounding moniker, the missile carries a devastating 2,500 pound warhead and could prove to be the most powerful weapon used in the war so far by either side. Fabian Hoffman calls it Ukraine's strongest security guarantee, even going as far as to suggest that Flamingos could eventually bring about an end to the war and force the Russians to retreat. If Ukraine can field 3,000 to 5,000 of these and similar missiles ready within 24 to 48 hours to destroy upward of 25% of Russia's economic output, further Russian aggression becomes untenable. And that's the end goal for Terek 2. People want results, they want to see Red Square on fire, but it's important to understand we're not terrorists like our neighbours. We founded our company in response to Russia's aggression, but we have no aggressive intentions. We're ready to protect our sovereignty. So, between the Flamingo, the Long Neptune and the Sapsan, Ukraine has more than enough firepower, all domestically made, to certainly do that and more. In the coming days, weeks and months, it can lean on these mega missiles to deal unprecedented damage to Russian targets, crippling the enemy's war effort and causing chaos so vast that even Putin's propaganda won't be enough to cover it up. This may very well prove to be the long-awaited turning point for Ukraine, and it's time for Kyiv to unleash its full force at long last. Now learn more about the Ukraine-Russian war in our recent video, detailing how Putin's large-scale summer offensive has well and truly fallen flat. Or check out our in-depth look at another of Kyiv's clever new arsenal additions, the jet-powered Mongoose interceptor drone. And finally, make sure to subscribe to our trusted channel too, to be among the first to learn about the latest big news and developments straight from the front lines.